Wow, what a crazy time it is to be alive as a football fan. But I tell you one thing, always rings true, is the FA will always put economics ahead of player safety. But let's get into it.
And blue is the colour. SCN! Drogba! Lampard! That could be the championship!
Greetings! Welcome back to Couch Critic with me, Dennis P. For what is another Chelsea-related video. We will be covering the match review for the Wolves game, but I don't want to just stay there. We are going to be going into some other topics that plague the club currently, and we will get into that right away. But before I do that, I want to let you guys know this is the holiday season, of course, and my boys from Major League Socks have taken care of you guys. If you enter the code Couch Critic, you will receive a 20% discount on all your purchases on the online store. And guys, remember, if you ever want to walk in the footsteps of greatness, you know what to do. Hit them up. The link is in the description. Okay, so an injury-riddled and COVID-stricken Chelsea squad traveled to Wolverhampton to play the Wolves, and the game finished 0-0 with Chelsea having not really created a lot of opportunities to score. And I don't really want to dwell too heavily on this match because I do think that a lot of what we saw on the weekend was just a result of Chelsea just not having enough healthy bodies to, really put the Wolves to the sword and play our real dominant style of football. Although we did control the match and we did have, 1 and 2 opportunities to score, just the cutting edge and the real the real decisiveness in the final third was just lacking. And, I wanted to touch on one area in particular before I go into some other things, and that is Chelsea's chance creation right now and where it's coming from. For me, I think that Chelsea lack a true creator, a true number 10. Somebody that could, stitch together attacking moves nicely, somebody that can investigate space, somebody that knows when to deliver the final ball, somebody that knows how to get into the dangerous areas and make the right decisions. And unfortunately, that's been lacking for quite some time, probably since Eden Hazard's left the club. We haven't had somebody that can really take over, the offensive brain in the club in the final third. And I think it's what's really been plaguing us. And this goes on well beyond just Eden Hazard. We brought in a lot of talent, last summer, the summer before, and we still don't have that, that cutting edge in the final third because the guys that we've brought in don't necessarily have that sort of mentality. I mean, I was told that Kai Havertz, who's a brilliant player, very cerebral and whatnot, he's supposed to be that sort of Ozil type player. And I'm even before he came to Chelsea, I always likened him to, a Thomas Muller. He just seemed like a more, fluid forward, a guy that can play your false 9-9, 8 and whatnot, and, shadow striker as well. And I feel like that's what is lacking right now. We're just missing somebody that can just be that true Ozil type thinker, in the attack right now. And, you look through the entire lineup, I guess Ziyech is a bit of a creator, but I just think that he's struggling with the pace and power of the Premier League. You see that he's not really as calm and composed on the pitch as when he was at Ajax, when he has time and space on the ball, because he's always so hurried in the final third. You see wayward pass after wayward pass. His decision making's poor. His ability to pick out passes is wayward, which is uncharacteristic for a guy of his quality. And it's going right through the squad. I mean, Mason Mount is a decent player in the final third, but I just don't think that he's an offensive brain type. He's not the kind of guy that's going to be, seeing moves and making the right decision, putting the pass right in the socket where it needs to be, a la Eden Hazard or a la Juan Mata, for instance. These types of players that see moves before they actually happen and get people in positions, orchestrate the offense in a way that, creates a lot of goal-scoring opportunities. Mason Mount, Christian Pulisic, more of an investigator. He's good at that. He usually uses his attacking ability to get into good areas, but once he gets there, I still think that his decision-making is a little poor. I mean, probably the closest thing we have to a real offensive thinker, a guy that can investigate space and make good decisions in the final third, is probably Callum Hudson-Odoi. And for me, unfortunately, he's just a little bit too immature in his game right now to make the right decisions all the time. There are times where, he gets into the right positions and picks up the right pass, But, for the majority of the game, I don't think that he's always switched on and he's always thinking, with the intent to hurt teams all the time. I think that sometimes he just dwells on the ball a little bit too much and hasn't really found that same sort of like chemistry with his teammates in order to like really, break through and be that guy, that Eden Hazard, that, that Fabregas when he plays the 10. I know he doesn't really be like that Eden Hazard, Juan Mata type player, a guy that can really be the offensive brain for this team. But yeah, like he's probably the closest we have to it at this point in time. And even with him, we don't get a lot of like, quality final third decision making. And you contrast that with somebody like, or a team like Man City, who have a ton of players who just in the final third, the game just slows down and they make the right decisions. I mean, I'm talking about the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, I'm talking about Grealish, I'm talking about, obviously Bernardo Silva, and even before that, David Silva. Like all of these guys that they have, when you get them into those positions, they always make the right decision. And we just lack that at Chelsea right now. And I really feel like a lot of this has just come down to the decisions at the board level, the scouting level, and just within the entire makeup of the club, the team, that is needs to be questioned right now. So let's get into that right away. The question also needs to be asked, like, how did we get into this position? How did we buy, the likes of Werner, Havertz, Pulisic, Ziyech, all these attacking players, Lukaku, and not take any consideration to who's going to be the offensive creator, the thinker, the guy that's going to stitch it all together for us. These are the questions that I want to ask, and I think that's something that starts at the very top of the, the structure of the club, the board, right down to the scouts, and then to the decision making of the management. So I want to go into that right now. I want to touch on that, just look at what that is all about and what's been happening the last few years with Chelsea, and see if we can come to some sort of conclusion as to what is going on. Why do we not have somebody that, after we spent over, £300 million maybe, why do we not have somebody that can like glue our attack together? Okay, let's start here. I do believe that like football has obviously been changing in the last like 5 to 10 years. And the role of the number 10, the guy that sits behind the striker, has definitely changed immensely. You don't find a lot of like true number 10s in the game anymore. They usually moved out wide to the flanks because there's more space out there for them to really create. And they operate best when they're not surrounded by a bunch of defenders. So the likes of Eden Hazard was moved out. Obviously he was a number 10, also a winger, but he moved out to the left flank because there's more space out there for him to operate. And I just feel like now what is lacking at Chelsea right now is somebody that can play out wide and still deliver that same sort of like offensive thought in the final third that you would get from a traditional number 10. I want to take you back to 2012 after Chelsea won the Champions League, and Roman Abramovic made that big statement that everything's going to change now. We're going to start, kicking on and becoming that big European club. Now we have that first European championship. And to be honest with you, a lot of what happened that summer, the summer that followed, was down to the intuition and genius of Michael Emenalo, the forethought of him. Like, I know we signed Kevin De Bruyne long before we had the Champions League final, but you can tell that like his identity, the way that Michael Emenalo identified players was nothing like this club had ever seen before. We were now attaching ourselves to players that were really technically gifted, obviously had vision, and were able to unlock in the final third. I'm talking about the likes of obviously Eden Hazard, Kevin De Bruyne. Say what you want about the German Marco Marin, but he was another guy that was, of that ilk, somebody that just likes to get into the final third and make decisions there. Oscar, another guy, hardworking, like more of a number 8, but also very creative and a thinker in the final third. All of these guys were brought into the club by Michael Emenalo, and under his tutelage, we saw some brilliant performances, but we just lacked the cutting edge up top. So, it seems like the squad now has gone the exact opposite way, where, before, when we had a structure into place and we were looking for guys that can really unlock teams and, basically, force feed balls into, Fernando Torres, force feed balls into, Samuel Eto'o, who was there for a while, Lukaku, who probably should have stayed and would have found lots of success in that particular structure. We just abandoned that completely now. And once Emenalo left, it seemed like the entire structure of the club how we look at players, how we scout players, how we go about like signing players has changed completely. You know, under Emenalo, there was not really any real big marquee signings. It was always like these, you know, 25 to 30 million pound signings that have a future in football. Buy them young and watch them flourish. But these are still incredible world-class talents. You know, the likes of Eden Hazard, the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, you know, Salah at 21 million or whatever we signed him for. Like, can you imagine signing a guy like Mohamed Salah, what he's turned into for 21 million pound or whatever it was? These are the types of players that Michael Emenalo was targeting and bringing into this Chelsea Football Club. And unfortunately, we just weren't able to like really assemble a true, you know, structure around these types of players because of the changing management that we always saw. You know, we went from Di Matteo to Benitez to Jose Mourinho to, you know, Hiddink into, you know, Conte. All these guys have different ways of playing football, and I think that what we're seeing, the brilliance of Emenalo was not really being appreciated because of the fact that like the style of football was always constantly changing year after year after year after year. And as a result, the players either weren't finding their role within the squad or were being sold because they didn't fit the new manager's way of thinking. The likes of Juan Mata being another example of that. What's happened now is Chelsea now under, you know, I guess Scott McLaughlin being the chief scout, have not really done a good job of uncovering any real gems, any real diamonds in the rough. The guys that we've basically been, you know, targeting are guys that are household names in Europe. You know, the likes of Kai Havertz, the likes of Werner, Lukaku, you can even say Chilwell. You know, all these guys don't come from deep scouting, like the ability to like go into Belgium and say, oh my God, look at all the talent here. Oh, Thibaut Courtois, look at this guy, you know, and like really scout the squad, like scout the countries, scout all over the world. We also almost forget that Emenalo was key in almost bringing Neymar to the club. He was the one that went to Brazil and helped find him. And then all of a sudden he starts getting linked with all of these clubs all over Europe, and Barcelona to be one of them. Now it just seems like what we're doing at the board level, the scouting level, is we're just attaching ourselves to these big names without any real vision about what these guys are going to do in the squad. You know, it's just like, oh, Kai Havertz, yeah, he scores a few goals. Yeah, he's silky on the ball. He's a German international. You know, he seems to score and assist. But how does he fit into the system? Like, what is his role within the system? Seems like we're spending a lot of money the last little while and not actually addressing the needs of the actual system in place. Under Frank Lampard, I don't think that he ever found a role for Kai Havertz in this squad. I don't think he ever found one. We tried him at the 8, we tried him at the 10, we tried him at striker, shadow striker, you know, all sorts of out wide on the right, all sorts of places, and no matter where we played him, he just never looked comfortable, and still hasn't, to be honest. Let's be honest, he hasn't really, just erupted as most of us thought he would as a footballer. You know, then we look at Lukaku now. We buy Lukaku, and you know, the guy bangs goals, you know, obviously, but what system is in place right now? What were the building blocks? What were the reasonings behind signing him other than the fact that we think he can score goals? Does he fit into the philosophy of this club? Did he fit into the mindset of how Thomas Tuchel likes to, you know, attack? What does he need from his attackers? I mean, when you look at his previous clubs, you look at the likes of Dortmund, Aubameyang, you know, Royce, Dembele, all of these guys aren't number 9s. You know, you look at PSG, I mean, of course you can say Cavani, but he can also play out wide as well. You know, they bring in Icardi, who barely played. And of course you have Mbappe and Neymar, who are the centerpieces of that team. And none of them are out number 9. So I don't think that Thomas Tuchel has even devised a system that is, you know, congruent with an out number 9. And yet we go into the market and we buy Lukaku and expect him to just perform in a system that's maybe not set up for him to flourish in. And these are the types of decisions that I'm seeing made time and time again under this paradigm of the board to the scouts and, you know, the manager. It seems like we're buying marquee players but not really having in mind what type of football the squad's trying to play. And that has been going on for quite some time now. Basically, what we've seen now is that Chelsea have been chopping and changing managers, winning lots of trophies and whatnot, but the byproduct of that was that we still do not have a proper philosophy or a structure in place. Because with every 18 months, when you have a manager coming in who has a completely different idea of football, You assemble a squad to basically fit his personality, his philosophy. And then when he's gone in 18 months, you have to reshuffle the whole team again and then find another squad of players to fit another manager's philosophy, which is completely different. And I think that a lot of this just comes down to the fact that we haven't really identified how we want to play football. We haven't really identified a style of play that we want to run with. I mean, I'm loving what I see under Thomas Tuchel, but how different is that from what we saw under, even like Conte, like a completely different style. And this is just like maybe a difference of, 3 years, 4 years, you know what I mean? So this is the problem that we're facing right now. We have all these players that we bring in on high wages and whatnot, that we try to suit to a particular style of play, a particular manager. And then when that manager is falling out with the board, he gets sacked. And then we bring in another manager who has a completely different way of playing. And because, again, like these players are on high wages and whatnot, we can't move them out to bring in other names. So we're basically stuck trying to find use players that don't necessarily function the way the new manager wants them to function. And they're playing game in, game out now because of the fact that we can't get rid of them. We went out and scouted Saul Niguez for 2 years apparently, and that's exactly what I'm saying. Like the fact that we're scouting these guys, Saul Niguez, another household name on high wages, and this guy has no ability to play in our midfield, like none. Like granted, he had a pretty decent game against the Wolves when he came in. I was shocked to say it, but he did play well for us in the 45 minutes that he did play. First time I've seen him play 45 minutes that was actually decent, but I digress. These are the guys that are being scouted for our football club. And I think that what needs to happen right now is one of two things. Either we need to reassess what we have in our scouting department, like who's making the decisions there to bring in these players, or we need to return our managers to the level where they're supposed to be making decisions about the final decisions about the player personnel. Because on current, we have Thomas Tuchel, who's labeled the head coach, the guy that is training the squad, the guy that is basically just taking whatever the club give him, whatever the scouting department and the technical directors give him, and trying to mold a system to fit whatever works best, but they're not necessarily catering to the very demands and needs of the manager. And that's the biggest problem right now. Either you go ahead and you allow him to, make the decisions and then either live or die by his own sword, or you bring in an actual director of football who has his own structure of football and his own idea about football, and basically assembles a squad that reflects what he wants to do, and he brings in a head coach to basically achieve the style of football that he wants to see. I mean, truly, this scattergun approach to like a player acquisition, management, and like scouting is just really, really hurt this team in terms of their long-term like goals and philosophy and whatnot. Like I look at the loan system right now. I was on a stream with the Blue Lounge guys yesterday, and we were talking about the loan system and how now that we're injury stricken and there's COVID and whatnot, how we don't have a big enough squad to cope because of all the dead weight that they have at the bottom of the roster and stuff like that. And a lot of this just comes down to me, the fact that we just haven't had a long-term manager, like somebody that can assess what's happening in the youth system, allow kids to come through, maybe 1 or 2 every like 3 or 4 years or something like that. And, really bed in a system of play and a philosophy that they can all adapt to, understand what's being asked of them, and then come in and flourish. Right now what's happening is we're just preparing kids for professional football, whether it's at Chelsea or elsewhere, it doesn't matter. Like we're not trying to like graduate youth kids into the first team. That's not part of the mandate at all. It only really changed when Frank Lampard came aboard, and even with that in mind, he didn't really even graduate youth players. He basically just took players that have been on loan for a little while, who were promising, the Mason Mounts, the Tammy Abrahams, the Tamoris. Anyhow, he took all these players, Reece James, and basically brought them back into the squad due to the fact that we had a transfer ban. As soon as the transfer ban was lifted, he was right back into the market buying marquee players again, and I'm not knocking Frank or anything. Like I really do think that that's the way forward for Chelsea. We have to continually be in the market for top name players, big players and whatnot, and to continually integrate them into the squad. The club decides that Chelsea need to do that, but the same time, when you have no long-term philosophy, a long-term plan, like from the youth system right up to first team football, you just get a disjointed club when you don't have that sort of like structure in place. And that's what we're seeing right now. So people are belly aching to the fact that like Conor Gallagher's on loan and whatnot. And, I'm not necessarily of that mindset. I really do believe that Conor Gallagher needed to go on loan in order to fulfill his, his full potential, because the likes of Chelsea right now, because we have those glut of players, like I said, the Ross Barkleys, Sal Niguez, Ruben, Kovacic, Jorginho, Kante, those guys were all basically positioned ahead of Conor Gallagher. And to be honest, when I saw Conor Gallagher play in the 6 in the preseason, I didn't think he looked that good. He's been flourishing in a more forward position, 8, sort of like 10 role, and we didn't have that available in the squad really. He probably, if you were to say, he'd probably be rivaling, the likes of Callum Hudson-Odoi, Mason Mount, Pulisic, and the pecking order is just way too high. Like this, he's way down the pecking order with those players, and it's not because he's not talented. It's just the fact that those players, there's a lot invested in those players, and we can't have them just sitting on the bench. We have to get the best out of them as well. Sending Conor Gallagher on loan made the best sense for the club and for the player. Maybe now in hindsight we're looking at it and we're saying, well, we could use this guy right now, but nobody could ever account for the amount of injuries and this COVID thing. You just can't account for that. You can't have players rotting away in reserves when they could be playing football elsewhere, applying their trade elsewhere, and really kicking on and getting better. Like next year, everyone's expecting Conor Gallagher to come into the squad and play a meaningful role. Would that be the case if he was still at Chelsea and, playing once every, 7 games, getting a 10 minutes here, playing in a cup game here and there? Is that enough football for him to truly flourish? I mean, when I look at football players, I think that the best performances you get out of them is when they're playing consistently and they find a rhythm on the pitch. You don't get that when you're playing like once every 5 games or something like that, once every 6 games. And that's basically what I think would have happened if Conor Gallagher would have stayed at Chelsea. He would just be playing sporadically here and there, covering for holes there and there, rather than, really kicking on and finding his football. But I do think I'm going to wrap it up there. Obviously, the match review wasn't really much of one, just because it wasn't really much of a match, let's be honest. We had about 7 players out with COVID, and then on top of that, the injuries as well. So didn't really see the best of Chelsea in this game. And, some incredible performances all the same, though. N'Golo Kante, I mean, this guy, man, hasn't played for months, comes back in and puts in a solid 90, and was probably my man of the match as well. Thiago Silva, ageless wonder, world class, obviously comes in and plays, doesn't play foot wrong. You expect that from him now, just because he's of that ilk. Class is permanent, and he is world class. So yes, these are the types of things. Like I can't really fault too many guys. Like, I mean, Christian Pulisic played, striker again. It's not really his position, and I can't really fault him for not taking the opportunity, but you really would like to see him just bury that, he's a guy that has decent finishing quality, and when you get 1v1 with the keeper, like in a game like that where the opportunities are so few and far between, you really need to see that go in the back of the net. But unfortunately, you put it into the keeper, and we move. Chelsea play Brentford, and this FA, man, like I really did touch on it during the video, because it's just expected. I knew this going in, that they were not going to cancel the Christmas fixture, just because there's just so much money at stake. These guys don't care about player welfare or whatnot. They'd rather see youth kids come in than lose the money, even though the quality of the football is going to be leagues lower than what its actual standard is. They would rather that than have a real brand of football, than to suspend it for a couple weeks and allow for some of these clubs to return to full health. Allow the COVID to come out of the clubs that they currently have them, and and play some real competitive football. They'd rather see 17-year-olds running around all over the place, in the name of the almighty dollar, the almighty pound. So no surprise there. True to form, the FA just cock it up again, and it's the players that have to struggle now. The supporters that have to struggle. All of this stuff. And again, I wash my hands of it. I've already said my piece. I know that like the Amazon deal is a big deal for them. They wanted to have the Christmas fixtures, and for whatever reason, the billions of dollars that are going into that take precedence over, player health and safety. So move on. We play Brentford in the Cup, who again are also ravaged with COVID and whatnot and injuries. But I didn't anticipate this Cup game would be played by a lot of first teamers anyways, just because of the fixture congestion and whatnot. So I anticipated that Chelsea would have probably played a younger squad and a more inexperienced squad anyways, and just hope that we can mix it with some of the more veteran players that are available to us right now. Who that may be, who knows? But yeah, the game goes on Wednesday. And then the weekend we have Aston Villa, who are also COVID stricken as well. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of these next few games. I don't know what Chelsea's going to show up. I don't know who's going to be available or whatnot. But I do know that what we all have to do is just keep supporting the team, keep the blue flag flying high, and up to Chelsea. Peace.